Welcome to episode 166 of your Livestock podcast, Top Lines and Tails. As always, I'd like to do a shout out and thank you to our sponsors Harborough for their continued support. On Top Lines and Tails, we tend normally to be a livestock podcast, and I'm not quite sure my guest is completely a livestock guy this week, but he is a farmer, and also, more to the point, he's a fellow podcaster there. We've got Wallace Currie, originally from the Isle of Arran. Wallace, welcome to Top Lines and Tails.
Thank you for having me, mate. Yeah, I mean, livestock-wise, I don't know if you maybe asked me five years ago, it might have been my top interest, but life always sways you in fun directions. So no, I'm maybe somewhat away from that now, but yeah.
Originally, I'd planned to speak to you a few weeks ago when I did a podcast on the Nuffield Scholarship, because your name came up as one of this year's Nuffield Scholars, so congratulations on that. But I think we've kind of, when I looked at your life, I thought, hang on, this guy's got a lot more to him than just a Nuffield Scholar, so let's have a rattle there. So yeah, congratulations.
Oh, thank you, mate. It's been quite something. I mean, I'm sure, like yourself, Andy, I assume here, but I've always been aware of Nuffield, and it was a thing my parents spoke about, and to be part of that sort of what feels like quite an elite crew is quite humbling in a way, in fairness.
Mm-hmm. I applied when I was 41, I think, or 42, and I just missed it. And John Scott got mine. I've never forgiven him. And if you're listening, John, he knows. And but I got too old after that and didn't go again. I wish I'd done mine earlier. So we'll go on to your Nuffield in a minute, Wallace. Let's just sort of talk a little bit about where you've come from and your day job now, I think, is as a college lecturer. So how did that get there?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny story, in fairness. I mean, probably a wee bit of background. You said I was from the Isle of Arran, which is absolutely true. The Arran famous for tourism and whiskey and not for woolen jumpers, which can often cause some confusion. But yeah, from a beef and sheep farm, mum and dad. I mean, if I was to have continued, I'd have been third gen, my dad and his dad again. My first name's actually Colin, so I was the third line of Collins. But yeah, beef and sheep farming, to be honest, as a kid, I mean, just before I jumped on the call with Andy, I was just finishing off watching the WWE Royal Rumble. Wrestling was my thing as a kid, still is to a point. I didn't think I was ever going to become one. Probably had the shape for it with the likes of Big Daddy and that. But anyway, that's a different thing. The farm was never probably what I was really interested in until I was maybe 14, 15, and then started to sort of get that stage. You're like, oh, Jesus, I should probably look at what I want to do, you know, and agriculture was one that came up in chat. Mum and dad were never forceful of it, but then chose agriculture to go study after school, and probably saw it originally just as a bit of time killing, but done that, fell in love with it in first and second year. Worked sort of in all sides of farming, whether that was maybe beef's the only one I really didn't do, dairy, sheep, arable, and just started to really enjoy it. But started to really enjoy the networking side, and I probably wasn't aware of that at the time. And I went through my 4 years agriculture and then did a master's in food security, which is obviously very topical with Ukraine, which I guess Ukraine's maybe in your talking point as well. I don't know if you want to talk about me going there, but yeah, after that I was like, this is interesting, but now I don't really know where I'm going. So I kind of just I trained as a cook through my years at uni, and I went back to being a cook for a while, and then started doing the job applications, and then suddenly I got furloughed during lockdown, started posting some videos of farming, and my now boss basically phoned me and said, seen a few videos of yours on Facebook, you ever consider lecturing? And I was like, nope, not at all. And he was my old lecturer, and I was like, look, John, mate, I think you know that's a mistake. And he's like, nah, let's give it a shot. So took that job. It fell through because of COVID. I started cutting grass, listening to podcasts when I was cutting grass, and thought I'd start my own. But when that around that time, SRUC get back in touch with me, another position had came up, and then in August 2020 I took on a role as an agricultural lecturer at the Barony campus, which I'm still doing, but it was all online at the start, and now it's very much all not online, thankfully.
Okay, yeah, there definitely was a change during the COVID times, wasn't it, for college and university? And there's a whole generation of university students who went through university for a couple of years without even going out the door and going in the students' union. And remind me just where Barony College is. So it's just about 7 miles out of Dumfries, so heading Edinburgh way. So Dumfries based. Okay, and so do you live down? Obviously, you live down that way now, I suppose. If you're into the uni every day.
Yeah, for the first couple of years, with it all being online, I either lived on Arran, taught it online, and basically filmed practical things for students to watch from the farm. I then lived in Ayr for 6 months, and again, it was still online. And then now, yeah, I've just bought a flat in Dumfries, well, a couple of years ago now. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you say about the lecturing online. Of course, you'd be reinventing the wheel in a case like that. I mean, there'd be no blueprint for what was right and wrong when you're trying to teach people when they've when. As a lot of people found during COVID, I've got friends who teach in COVID and found it hard work, I have to say. My pals are doing teaching this. It was a damn sight harder putting a course together to do it online than it was standing up in front of a class and shooting from the hip. So would the same apply, I guess?
It did in a way. It wasn't completely reinventing the wheel for me because I'd never done the normal teaching. So it was like taking on a normal job, and yeah, that's just how the job went. And I think I somewhat thrived in that environment because I like tech. I sort of like that sort of thing, and it gave me quite a good head start. I got to build up probably quite a good portfolio behind myself to prove what I could do. And then coming on to the sort of well, this is me on campus. I'm like, shit, there's lots of students in front of me. What do I do? And then, pretty quickly it was fine, in fairness. And I absolutely love that part of the job. It's just talking to students, whether they're 16 or I think the oldest student I've taught was 52. It's just, you learn so much from it. It's a class that I'm teaching, but also everyone's learning. So, yeah, it was a big change, but there's a lot of tech out there that allows it to be doable.
Sure. And we'll go on to your podcast. As I said, you're a fellow podcaster. Well, I will just ask which came first, the lecturing or the podcasting, or were those two simultaneously, maybe?
So, I mean, the offer of the original job and the podcasting must have been around the same month. What happened was basically I'd started Rural to Kitchen, which is the brand that the podcast is built upon, as I was furloughed, I think it was the 12th of April it started. And then basically around June time, Mum had and I make a point of saying Mum, not me, had a fantastic polytunnel. And I had the sort of cookery background, and I sort of just tied the whole story in, talking about agriculture, the importance of buying local and all that sort of stuff. And basically someone had said, how'd you get into farming? And I was like, geez, like I'm not officially yet, but I assume heir to a farm. I didn't even care about it really at the young age. Have grown into really care about it now, but I wasn't the person to ask. So I basically messaged a guy called Flavian Obiero, the Kenyan pig farmer, quite often on Countryfile these days, I think it is, and wrote a 1,000-word essay about him. I did that for 26 weeks, and then I was like, I am bored of writing stories. Let's do the podcast. So that was July, and I got officially offered the job late July. So yeah.
Okay. Both are off at the same time, and I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, and they're very good. You do get a very diverse clientele on there, which more so than myself. But say, we'll go on to the podcast in a minute. But from your teaching point of view, I'm right in thinking you teach diversification in farming. I mean, is that a standard college subject these days?
Well, it's an interesting one because, I mean, when you say you're an agricultural lecturer, the question is crops or livestock. And in fairness, my remit's somewhat out of both of them. I teach a wee bit of sort of basic reproductive endocrinology, like the impact of hormones and the female reproductive tract, mainly a little bit of the male. But that's probably my main contact with livestock these days. My master's was food security, so I talk a wee bit about global production, some precision agricultural techniques that are used mainly in the crop side, but a little bit in the livestock side. And then, yeah, you're absolutely right. Diversification and specialised farming systems are... I don't know if you've done a qualification in agriculture, Andy, but I've certainly done one.
Whatsoever. You're talking to the most unqualified man in the entire world. I'm qualified by bluffing my way through just about everything I've ever done there. So I think most people listen to this podcast will know that, to be fair, but carry on.
There's a hell of a lot more qualifications than the one on paper, and a hell of a lot of them are a lot more important. I think a lot of people put a lot of weight on those college and uni ones, but there's not as much weight in that. Someone that's coming from someone that has them and now teaches them, but that's a different thing. The way the qualification I done, and in fairness, the way even some of our students that are at higher level now done, was very minimal practical, absolutely no form of placement, and just completely like assess. I think the HND had 52 assessments and the HNC high 40s. And it was intense, and I remember not really learning. I was learning for the assessment. Whereas now we've moved towards this next gen, and here, don't get me wrong, there's teething issues, we have problems that we're fighting through, but that's always going to be the issue. I think we've really made a step in the right direction. So much more holistic, practically. There's a practical requirement of 30 skills first off. So throughout the course of the year, we've got 2 instructors and a few others sort of working on that. We've got a placement that starts the start of next month, so the start of March. We have a 4-week and by extension of Easter holidays 6-week placement into a farm or agribusiness. And then on top of that, the assessment is very much less onerous, somewhat larger assessments, but down at that sort of early 20s mark. So it's made a really good step in the right direction. And one of those modules, or actually 2 of those modules, one is called Diversified Enterprise and Rural Business, and one is called Specialised Farming Systems. And my take on that, I've sort of took the lead on those, is basically, look, I can sit in the class and teach you stuff, but what's the point? Let's just go to places. So I've got 7 trips booked for Diversified Enterprises. Is basically a farm that now has a separate enterprise, either as the main or sole enterprise for the business, and Specialised Farming Systems is looking at crop and livestock enterprises away from the conventional, so dairy, sheep and goats or that sort of thing. So that's where that comes in, and I really enjoy it. It means I get to go on a few wee jaunts and try some ice cream here and there and try buffalo burgers and stuff, but it's really good to see what's out there and see what's away. Farming's not just what we think of, so that's why it is a completely accepted part of the new course. So yeah, a long answer for what you'd asked, but
absolutely brilliant. I mean, there's a lot of farmers listen to this, young farmers as well, every one of them is looking at a diversification of some sort. Some of them have tried a few and I would say failed, but tried a few and it wasn't for them. Other ones have tried a few, been very successful, and there's no wrong answer to this, is there? I mean, there must be a few wacky ones out there that maybe you look at that and think, no, that's never going to work. Is there, or is anything goes?
I'm a bit one of those folk that probably almost wants to find those ones, because I'm like, I just find it cool. I mean, you look at our Nuffield cohort, Andy, one of the guys, David, has a business called Fly to Feed, which is I'll probably get the wrong insect, I can't remember the exact fly, but basically looking at fly as a feed product. And I mean, 20 years ago you'd said that, folk would have thought you were nuts, but it's a fantastic feed conversion efficiency. There's a lot of stuff out there that, I mean, Steve Mitchell at Buffalo Farm, which is one of the places we go, we're going there 2 weeks on Thursday, he looked at alligators, he looked at snakes, he looked at ostriches. You never know what's going to work, man, and there's always something that might just be the one you hit the jackpot with,
I think Edison said that when they said, how come you failed 1,000 times doing your experiments to invent the light bulb? He said, I just managed to find 999 ways not to invent the light bulb before I eventually invented it. So there's no wrong research at all.
Well, that's it. And is there not some disputes as to whether he even invented it or not? I don't even know. I'm not really up on all that stuff. But
that's another story that him and Tesla had a big fight over, I know. But
yeah.
And I think he had a class full of students doing the test for him. So you never know there. If anybody comes in your class comes up there with an idea how to make houses out of broken eggs or something, you can claim that as your own idea. But it's fascinating. You talk to the likes, you said, of Stevie Mitchell, a classic example really of the buffalo, and there's obviously a lot of people nowadays into holiday lets, and I suppose it's got to be a way of seeing what's in your area and what suits your area. And I mean, some would say there's too many holiday rents out there, maybe too many shepherd's huts and what have you going out there. The banks get involved in these things, and the banks obviously have to have an understanding of whether somebody's really serious or they're just having a strange idea. But some of these things will get overdone fairly soon, and I suppose you've got to have an understanding of that yourself there, Wallace.
Well, I think the diversification thing's an interesting one. I actually done my undergraduate dissertation on, let's see if I can remember the title, is on the Isle of Arran, is on farm diversification. I can't remember the exact title, but basically the attitudes of farmers towards on-farm diversification on the Isle of Arran, that's what it was. And it was written just before Brexit. We knew Brexit was coming. I've always been really interested in that sort of qualitative side of, opinions and attitudes. It's probably why I have a podcast. I love hearing folks' stories and why they think and how they think. And it was looking at that. I did that dissertation after Brexit had been voted in, but before really anything had happened, and just looking towards, what do we do without subsidy? And I've sort of focused on this a lot, and a lot of things, we don't know what's coming. We've heard different things, but we really don't know in stone what is coming, Brexit-wise. And diversification has got to be a thing to look at. Now, you might be right, there might be too much, but I think the person who decides if there's too much holiday homes is the person who's doing it, and if they're making money from it, then fire on. It's a tricky one. But I think we really don't know what's coming, and that's why I was so interested in diversification in any form, because farming on its own, unfortunately, as arguably the most important industry in the world, cannot keep itself going.
Sure, you're right about the Brexit, and people voted for it, having no idea what they were voting for, but they thought we've got to give it a go. It might be better than the norm. It might not do, but going back to the diversification, there's some. Yeah, but I certainly remember my father looking at diversification or as a farm, and my grandfather was into strawberries and there's all sorts of fruits and always changed things. And by the time my father came in, it was farming this is the way you do it, and you don't really move away from that. But it's about the money. I always thought the money to bring into farming was the education, or bringing the money in from the masses who don't really know where the food comes from, don't really understand where the food comes from. And if we bring them onto the farm, we'll get a better understanding. So you're twofold. I had Gareth Wynne-Jones on here, and you're twofold, really. If you're educating the public and you're taking a wee bit of money off them for doing that, I mean, that seems to be, diversification would be the number one way that most people would look at that, I guess.
It is. I think, Gareth, I've had Gareth on the podcast as well. Gareth and I have known each other for I think he was like my 7th episode on the interviews before it was actually recorded, just written down. And Gareth created a business out of being an obstructive character. He gets a reaction, and he's created when Gareth started his YouTube channel, I'm a complete social media nerd. When he started his YouTube channel, he said his goal was to hit 100,000 in the year. And I said to myself, I wasn't in any way not hoping he would. He's brilliant if he can. I was like, that's just impossible. You can't do that. The content he's creating, that can't happen. And he has done it. He hit 1 million. He's just hit 1 million. And what he's doing sells. But I just worry not worry is the wrong word, not at all. My thought on that is the people that are coming to find out are the ones that probably already know a little. Getting those people that, I know he said a vegan on the farm and whatnot and that sort of thing, and it went well. It went, depending how you want to look at it. But the ones that we're really trying to show what's happening they're the ones that just aren't going to do that. And that's where it becomes challenging. I'm really interested in comms and marketing. You mentioned young farmers. As of April, unless something really goes wrong, I'll be the chair of comms and marketing at national level for SAYFC. But getting that sort of story out to the people that matter is difficult. And I don't know how we do that, to be honest.
That's exactly the conversation that we had with them. It's easy to preach to the converted, but how do you get to those programs, the mainstream programs, if you like? And I know we got sort of opinions on things like Country File and what have you. How do we get? I've had this conversation with Cammy Wilson, of course. You know Cammy as well. How do we get that message out to those people who would take that little bit of education from knowing nothing? Just a little bit is all they need, but it's very hard to get through to those people. But we do have, and again, I think Gareth agreed with that one. We do have a responsibility, each and every one of us, to take that education out there if we can.
I do, and I think there's people like Cammy and Gareth as well. But I would say sort of what you're saying there, folk like Cammy, folk like Ben Best, who you may or may not know of Dalscon Farm. That's what I very much am interested in. I wrote a PhD proposal on let me get this right, the potential positive impact of social media agricultural influencers on the sort of agricultural industry in the UK. And it's looking at, they've broken out into mainstream. Folk that don't like sheep or don't like farming are watching Ben Best's half hour every morning to put a positive spin on agriculture. And you mentioned Country File. I've actually interviewed Adam Henson as well, and I had a really good chat with him off camera, and he made a really good point. I don't watch Country File, not because I don't watch Country File. I don't really watch TV, like, ever. I'm very boring. I watch and listen to nothing. And no offence, Andy, but I haven't listened to this. Please don't be offended. But he said, that's half an hour that 6 million people are watching every week. And Country File, you could argue, is dialed down. It's whatever. But it's showing the rural sector in a positive space, and that's got to be a good thing. I think it's got to be.
I hear what you say. It's dialed down, and there'll be a mix of opinions on here, and could be a lot more with it. Obviously, Scotland's got its land, which is it's a little bit more agricultural orientated, should I say? But as you said, we shouldn't knock it at the end of the day. For every person that sees, I suppose we've got to look at Jeremy Clarkson. He's probably the man that made the biggest impact in farming of anybody, really, just by the pure numbers that he got through the gate and telling it warts and all without anybody dumbing his or looking down over his shoulder a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, I think he has. I mean, he absolutely has. I absolutely love the guy. I think he's done some fantastic things. My Countryfile comment isn't that I think it's perfect. It's just it's a thing that we probably don't really consider. I think we as the farming community are expecting. Now, I'm too young to actually remember this, but mum and dad would say like the farming program. I think we're expecting that, whereas it's slightly different, and maybe we need that. And I think this Farm and Life, for example, went really well up here, and it's done a great job as well. It's a very fine line when you're dealing with something so controversial as you know the perception of animal life and that sort of thing. It's a tricky one, and yeah, it's an interesting one. I think is probably what I really mean. Yeah,
I've had Gareth Fielding on my podcast there talking about this farming life and about the making of it, and and the realization that what a highly influential job he's doing that I don't think he realized when he took it on. That the expectation on him really to be able to put that over to the public in a way that that they would like it and not sort of be turning it off because they got too much gore on it. And let's just move away from that a little bit. You mentioned young farmers. You're fairly new young farmer. You're an old young farmer. I don't know how old you are, but you said you've only recently joined Young Farmers. How did that work?
I am a new and an old young farmer, so I'm 27 for reference. Just 2 weeks ago, so still got the 3 years left in Young Farmers. But no, I went to uni at 17 and done as I said, and had the uni life you think of when you say uni life. I think it would be fair to say. And with that, I saw no need for Young Farmers. We had folk in the class, David and Craig most namely. David, who actually just won Young Farmer of the Year last year. Who did everything Young Farmers, and I'm like, why? Like, we go to the beach, we go to the pub, we do everything. Like, we have a good time, And I generally didn't see it. I'd see the point. And then I, around that stage, was like, well, let's try it. So I started the Arran Young Farmers. I chaired, secretaried and treasured it for 18 months and got it sort of going, along with others, obviously, but, I sort of took the roles. And it unfortunately fell apart. I had to move away, and these things happen. And that was basically my only dalliance with Young Farmers, if you will, until May 2022, when I'd only really just moved to Dumfries maybe 6 months prior and hadn't really got involved. And someone said, why don't you come along? And I was like, well, I'd actually went to a concert and went to the dance after, and they're like, well, come along. And I was like, oh, well, I'll give it a shot. Went along to play golf basically one day at a driving range, and they put a new members form in front of me, and here I was a member, and I didn't really think anything of it because I didn't do much. I went to the odd thing, made some mates, and then concert came around. And for those that know me and for those that don't, there's very little times I'm more confident than when I'm on stage. I just feel I love it. It's just home. I love it, and I hadn't done it for ages, and fell in love with it. Had some fun. Really loved the concert. And sort of had this affinity to Lower Nithsdale Young Farmers at that point. And with that, I was a member, and I was a pretty active member coming into the sort of new year, so like a year ago at the minute, and I did some speech making, and that was fine. And then I saw the application for the national committees, and I was like, I didn't really think of sort of just how big that was, in fairness. And I was like, oh, class, comms and marketing, like I work in. I've got a job in podcasting, and I've got this. I like social media. Let's give it a shot. Got in touch, and then lo and behold, not only been voted on, but put forward if I would like to be as the vice chair, sort of basically second in line of the committee and running all internal and external relations of Young Farmers. And I was like, geez, I didn't really expect this. And as it happened, I was like, well, this is. I mean, I'm not an 18-year-old that's just jumped into Young Farmers. I've got experience behind, and I really enjoy it. It's probably my favourite part of Young Farmers, that national level, sort of looking at the strategy of what is, as of last week, an organisation with 3,500 members, and just meeting so many folk from so many different backgrounds. It's taken me to Shetland. It's taken me to a few shows. Well, I say a few. I think I counted recently, but 17 shows. And then I think I've got to mention it's taken me to Tanzania and Rwanda. It's just offered me so many opportunities in such a short period of time, and I'm really, really looking forward to April. I'll be taking over from Laura McCulloch, who's been an absolute saint, learning from her, taking over from Laura and seeing what we can do for the next year. And in fairness, 2 years, because you get an ex-official as the ex-chair role in the committee, and see what we can sort of take. I've got a few ideas, some pretty big ideas coming, so it's exciting, it's good fun, and it's just... I've built a career and life off of people, being around people, and I absolutely love it. It really has been a fantastic choice for me.
Fantastic. There you are, you young farmers out there. You non-young farmers out there. You're never too old to join the young farmers, because you can dive straight in the deep end if you want. And you don't need all those years of learning how to drink in young farmers before you got there. So brilliant. And you mentioned Rwanda. I did listen to a podcast that you done recently, and you talked about your trip to both Rwanda and Tanzania. And for all, sounds like you're going there on a scout there. It seems to be a real eye opener for you. And I think you kind of poured your heart out a little bit of the passionate side of that as well. It was a trip of a lifetime there, Wallace.
It was, I think at the time I thought it was a trip of a lifetime, but having fallen in love with travel out there so much, there's no doubt in my mind now that I'll be back in both countries. I would say I've got friends in both now, and I'd been to Holland and Iceland before August 2023 on 4-day trips during uni, and basically at the end of June came. It was about a week after Highland Show, and Jane, who's our national chair this year and has done a great job, a really good friend of mine. We've got a fantastic relationship. People probably think we hate each other, but Jane got in touch with me and she was like something along the lines of, "Have you got a passport? Do you want to come to Rwanda?" And I didn't look for my passport. I was quite certain I didn't have a passport, and I was like, "Yes, I have. Like, this is happening." And then, we went out to Tanzania to speak at 4-H Global Food Summit. 4-H is basically your a youth group that's global. There's more 4-H members in the States than there is people in Scotland. So that was. Well, I mean, it's not even farming in general. FFA, which is Future Farmers of America, is directly farming, hence the name. But 4-H is in general, and SAYFC is sort of a cross between the two. And they do everything, not just farm based. I guess you could say SAYFC does as well, but I mean it really is everything. And their 30th year anniversary turned out to be when we were there, and we had this lovely cake and all that. And it was such a fantastic experience to meet some great folk and really changed my life. Like we went to an orphanage there, and it was both the happiest and saddest experience of my entire life. And I struggle to see how that changes. We went to then Rwanda, which we were there to sign a contract between SAYFC, so Scottish Association of Young Farmers Clubs, and then RYAF, which is the Rwandan Youth Agribusiness Forum, which actually SAYFC were very integral in forming. And they're similar. There's major differences, but there's major similarities. But one of the things that I said straight away that I wanted to do, and I felt we had to do, was go to the Kigali Memorial Museum, the Genocide Memorial. And I'd said that, the previous experience was the saddest and happiest. This was probably the saddest solitary experience. And just, I mean, for those that know what happened in Rwanda, you know what happened in Rwanda. For those that don't, basically about 14% of their population were killed by their own over the sake of a completely stupid segregation of, we say these people are this and these people are this because of the length of their noses and distance between their chin and nose. Like, it was a complete, a horrible thing that happened. And we had to understand that to understand what Rwanda was. And when you think of Rwanda, along with a few Central and Eastern African countries, I think it's fair for me to assume people don't think of the most developed, it's a term I hate, but the most developed countries in the world. Rwanda was like London with sand. Like Kigali was phenomenally developed. The president, Paul Kagame, is the most progressive politician I've came across, and just I was blown away. But yeah, it changed my life for so many different reasons. And in fairness, probably made me fall in love with travel without realizing I loved it. And obviously you mentioned Nuffield at the start, Andy, which is then came on to that, So no, an amazing experience and one that was completely born from the opportunities SAYFC can offer people.
Fantastic. And there you go. That again, everybody, those opportunities are there. So you mentioned Tanzania as well. Tanzania is a similar country. I mean, I think they about neighbour each other, but they're not the same countries, are they?
They do neighbour. I actually wrote a post about this, and I was somewhat attacked for it, and fair enough. It was just my perception. For anyone this is not a hopeless plug, by the way, this is genuinely, if you're interested in travel, I post everything. Every day I'll post a pretty notable amount of what I'm doing travel-wise. So if it is of interest, feel free to follow the account. But the post I basically put was, when you look at Tanzania and Rwanda objectively, Tanzania should be the success story. Rwanda 29 years ago, well, actually 30 as of April, had the genocide we speak of. It's completely landlocked. It's got a tourism sector, but it's really been created in the last 15 years. Its tourism sector was essentially based around the fact they have a gorilla population. Whereas you look at Tanzania, genuinely, unfortunately we didn't need to do it. We didn't get to do it, but you look at Tanzania. I think it's something like 1,408 kilometers of coastline. They've got a thriving one of the most thriving tourist destinations on the planet in Kilimanjaro, and also one of the Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Botswana, and Zimbabwe on the list of places for safari, which we were lucky enough to do at Tarangire. And as I've said, not landlocked, and they just don't. It is not in any way forward. It's arguably regressive in that their education system is guilty, and admit this. I mean, we heard a few people say this, that they don't want to teach the kids too much in case they go too far. And that was an open thing that we heard. But I mean, I like Tanzania more than Rwanda because I just felt at home. Everyone was lovely. Not that Rwandans weren't, but Tanzanian were. It was just so welcoming. I loved it. I'll always have a massively special place in both, but Tanzania in particular.
Excellent. Well, what a great experience somewhere I've never been to. What a fantastic experience to be able to take that on, and more travel, as you said. You got the travel bug there. We'll maybe go into your podcast in a minute, but then tell us a little bit more about what your Nuffield scholarship holds in store for you with regards to getting that wanderlust sorted out again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for a bit of a shocking start, I guess, an interesting start. Fly to Brazil in about 4.5 weeks. So yeah, it's basically, for those that don't know what Nuffield is, Nuffield was started in the late 40s, right after the war. I think it was 1947. Basically as a fund to allow people to, and at that point it wasn't quite as extravagant, don't get me wrong, but travel somewhere to see what's happening, to try and bring that back to make agriculture better in this country. And now with time, it's became an extremely well sought after, I'm not arguably, it's better. I would say it's more sought after than a PhD in our sector nowadays. What it now has become is very much a global travel scholarship to sort of try and better agriculture in this country. And I'd seen it, and I think people that apply for an Nuffield scholarship in general, you probably don't know until they are successful, and you might not even know if they're never successful. But the day I originally opened the application, I put a post about it. And I actually found, I do a lot of speeches and stuff at different events, found one that I wrote at the end of January saying a couple of weeks ago I started a Nuffield application. So my plan was to share the process. I like sharing the process. I don't care if I fail or succeed in what I'm doing. I just sort of like saying what's happening.
And I did do a podcast on the Nuffield when I spoke to you, and we spoke to Charlotte Merson, and she spoke highly of you, but of course all the rest of the people there. But I mean, she runs that outfit fairly well, but it's up to everybody to go in there with their own ideas, isn't it?
I think it'd be fair to say I'm probably the biggest annoyance for Charlotte. I'm very organised in my head. Like, I know when everything's happening, but I'm terribly bad at parlaying that to others. I'm very aware of this issue. And poor Charlotte, she is. I mean, Charlotte and her team, but Charlotte in particular is an absolute queen. I don't know how she organises things as well, but she's amazing. And she really is. But my plan was originally social media. So I wanted to look at basically what I said with that PhD. I then sort of thought that seems a wee bit more PhD, and I could probably sort of go and travel with that PhD, maybe to California or something like that, and try and get a university to cover that elsewhere. So I thought, well, Nuffield, what could I do slightly different? And I realised without realising that I'm extremely, extremely interested in my job that I do. Education and agriculture, what can I do? So basically wrote into apply about that, and my application was probably subpar because I'm really not great at that side, but was offered the interview, which was great. And I think it's fair to say, like, the interview side is more where I will thrive, in fairness. And it was a panel of 13 people in the room, I think 9 of which asked questions, and my basically 4 objectives, which they asked me in the interview if I had objectives, to which I said yes, but I didn't, and I had to sort of make them up then. Was basically looking at agricultural education on farm, and is training happening, is health and safety training, is quad telehandler training happening. The second objective being in schools, so primary and higher primary and high school, are they teaching food production? I think RET in Scotland, and NFU Education do great things in primary schools. And I don't know if you've came across Ian Robertson with Countryside Learning, and he's actually my uncle. I think what they're doing in secondary schools is fantastic. I've just told you about what positives I think we're moving in the further and higher education sector, which is sort of objective 3, but there's so many better things we've got to do. And then 4th was sort of like almost like a cross country of the UK, I guess, implementation plan when I came home. And that's still not really changed. The original plan was Japan, Singapore, Holland and Switzerland. It was ETH Zurich in Switzerland, one of the top 20 universities in the world, and as well as that, consistently in the top 5 agriculture. Holland with Wageningen University, the best ag university consistently. Japan, because they've got arguably the most advanced ag tech university in the world in Kyoto University. And then National University of Singapore in, you guessed it, Singapore, because they currently sit at 7% self-sufficiency and are looking at a sort of urban farming plan to get that up to 30% by 2030, which, 340% or whatever is insane. And now that has extended to, thanks to the support of various sponsors. The McRobert Trust is my primary sponsor. People like Howden have got involved to help me as well. And I now plan on doing New Zealand, the States, and arguably Kenya and Ethiopia to sort of scratch that African itch again, really. So yeah, it's a fantastic organisation that, as someone very much in its infancy of involvement, I strongly advise they give a look at and see what's out there. But make my one piece of advice early on is, I'm sure I'll have more advice in 2 years' time when I finally submit it. But my one piece of advice is, don't do Nuffield for Nuffield, do Nuffield for a topic. Don't just do it because you want to do it. You've got to. I went into that interview with absolutely no nerves because I knew whatever they asked me, I either knew or I would only learn. You need to know it. You need to be interested in it. So, yeah, that's Nuffield.
Brilliant. Well, certainly commendable, and I can imagine them taking you on with that because they know that you will not just bring that back to show it to Nuffield, but obviously in your professional role at the moment to be able to take that back into the classroom too. Although I'm not quite sure how you're going to get to be in the classroom if you're going to be travelling for the next couple of years, but I'm sure you've got an understandable boss or an understandable relationship that you can fit all that in there. And
a great Boston team, yeah.
and you've said with the sponsorship of that, I know you do some work at the Highland Show. I think we're on the same team with Simon Cousins' team there. I do this commentary on the beef cattle and the sheep there, along with Scotty Brown there at Redpath and Finlay McIntyre, Andrew Goldie, a few more of us there. And I believe you've been involved in that as well. So you're a man that gets into all sorts of places.
I just sort of I'm not really that busy, so I just sort of have a lot of time to say yes. That's generally how I think a lot of folks say you've got to start saying no, and I agree to a point, but I only say no to things that I don't want to do. I'm really lucky that I'm able to pretty much exclusively say yes to things that I enjoy, and that Simon Cousins is a great guy. That came about because of my involvement with young farmers. They take on young farmers to do sort of a presentation each of whatever topic. And basically, I saw goats wasn't taken. I bloody love goats, and I jumped at that opportunity. And I think it would be fair to say Simon and the team quite liked it, and hopefully something more can come of that this year because I really enjoyed it. So,
damn, we volunteered Andrew Goldie go and take that. Who's a neighbour of yours, I think. We volunteered Andrew Goldie to take the goat roll on, but I think he backed down and down Redpath around a mile. And so well picked up the baton there. I think the hand grenade landed firmly in your lap on that one. But, good job. I'm sure we'll get a crack with that. And I know you're into walking as well and fitness and that sort of thing. But didn't you get into trouble last time you went on a big walk somewhere?
Yeah, man, it's an interesting one. In fairness, it's a really frustrating stage currently. I'm as I'll tell you, I tore my calf in July with a wee bit of spice added to it. But I'm struggling. I walked a 10k at 3 o'clock yesterday morning, and it's my first one in some time. I really struggled to get into walking. There was about an August to July period, so essentially a year, where probably from January to July I was walking 85 kilometres every single week. I wasn't really a sleeper. I think it's maybe fair to say now that I've found a relationship that sleeping's happening a bit more. In fairness, it seems to be more comfortable and no need to run away. But yeah, it was going out at, I'd probably stop filming podcasts at maybe say 11, and then I'd go walk till 4, and that sort of 3 3/4 hours was a half marathon. So I'd just do that and absolutely loved it and was as fit as I've ever been. But yeah, in July, sort of came to a crescendo, which was intended but not fully intended because the end part wasn't. But basically, SAYFC I was realising I got a lot from. RSABI, an organisation I've in no way had anything from, but just see the absolute unending merit of that organisation. I was like, well, walking's taken me from, in that August period, a bloody low point. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying depression. I think we throw the word around too much, but a rough point, a really rough point where counselling was required and whatnot. And walking was my therapy, well, along with the 6 days of therapy, but walking was the therapy that got me out of that, and I wanted to give back in some way, so started a fundraiser for those two to walk around the aforementioned home island of Arran, which is 56 miles, but I thought loads of folk have done that, let's do it twice, and let's go west one time and then east the other time, and then no one can say you went the easy way. So I thought I'd everything covered, and I think in fairness I did. I was 21 kilometres in, which is about a seventh of the journey, an eighth of the journey, sorry. My feet weren't in any way affected, muscles still fine. I mean, I could easily walk 2.5 marathons without feeling it. I was used to that. And this was about 4.7 and 50 hours with a couple of breaks, so it was easy enough. And I was at this 21 kilometres. I know I'm kind of jumping between miles and kilometres. I don't know why I do that, but 21 kilometres is a half marathon. I was at that stage, all was fine. It was about 8:30, maybe 8:15 at night in the middle of July, so very bright. I was wearing a completely red top and red shorts, and here this van sort of came at me, and I was like, oh shit, this thing's going to hit me, I better jump out the way. And my ability to jump out the way was somewhat late, hit off the wheel arch and bounced off the road. So when I landed, I sort of I'm not saying I felt like a superhero, by the way, it's to try and give you an idea of how I landed. I sort of landed in that superhero pose, but as I did, subsequently tore my calf. So went into A&E. They said this had happened, and I never actually went back to doctors, which I probably should have, but that happened, and basically ever since then I've really struggled to get back walking. That 10k I'd done would normally take me pretty much a 55 minute for 6k, so maybe an hour 25, and it took me 2 hours 30. So I mean, it's amazing the change. It's basically an hour over 10k. So hopefully get back to it soon, because it was the best thing I've ever done.
Do that, but just mind out for getting run over again. That's not. Not only, I mean, it depends where you're walking in the middle of the road. And I'm taking a piss. I'm sure you didn't do it intentionally or do anything wrong there. But you're lucky to survive that one, I guess, going on with that. But as you said, you're looking to get back towards it. Let's just go on to your podcast, because I think you run 2, is it maybe 3 podcasts you run there, Wallace? You certainly do. You've done more episodes than I have. I think we're on episode 167. I think you've done more than that. And you just tell us a bit more about. You mentioned your podcast about being in the kitchen and cooking, so just give us a bit more about your podcast and where to find it, and some of my listeners want to go away and have a listen to you.
Yeah, I was just looking at yours. Is yours every Friday and Wednesday? Is that right?
No, I'm just once a week, but I've actually cut that back to probably once every couple of weeks now. We've cut back.
Okay. I don't know. So I guess you could say I've got 3 series. It's all in the one place though. So if you're in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, as far as I'm aware, it's whatever at this point. If you just type in R2cast, so the letter R, number 2, and then the letter K, asked, it'll come up. But it's called R2cast People in Food and Farming, which is what it begun. But now it's got a slash and it says all in. And the reason for that was around November time 2022, so about 15 months ago, at the point of recording this, Andy, I was doing pretty good in views, to be honest, very good actually. And I was like, well, what can I do here? Is there a way I can sort of branch out? And my method of branching out was starting an R2cast groups podcast. So the idea behind that was, let's bring on breed societies, charities, young farmers clubs, for example. And that was a good idea. What was not a good idea was it's bloody difficult to arrange 8 people's time together. So I think I managed about 4. The plan was to do 4 episodes of the Food and Farming a month, individual person, maybe a couple. 2, basically every second Monday night, releasing a groups, and that fell by the wayside very quickly. So I was still eager to do something else, and I was sitting chatting to someone in the pub who had a pretty interesting career in Australia, just working in oil and mining and stuff like that, some random things, and I was like, this is interesting. why don't I just interview anyone? So I was sitting about 95 episodes at that point, and I thought, well, 100, I'm going to release something big. Unfortunately, for those that were expecting something entertaining, it was a podcast about me, but also a sort of, let's also try and create something new, and that's when the All In began, and it's became footballers, sportsmen, sports people, travellers, whatever. I've had the world record holder for the first person to ever go to every country twice, a maniac, lovely guy, but a maniac. I've had, I don't know if you're a football fan, Andy, but I'm guessing age-wise, if you are, you'll have heard of Stevie Nicol, the right back for Liverpool. Mm-hmm. Had Stevie on last week, and just really enjoying that side. And I've brought a friend in, Ed Martin, who was the chairperson of Lower Nith, as I mentioned earlier when I invited him on. So now it's 6 episodes a month of food and farming, either people or groups, and then two of All In. So it's 2 every week that's released at the minute. And yeah, the only sign is to maybe jump that up to 10. I have no signs going down. I just absolutely love it. I enjoy speaking to folk. I enjoy getting to sort of tell my story to the viewers as I go, just wee tidbits here and there. They would know what I'm doing in life. And I love the opportunity to, I'm maybe not the best example for you, Andy, but you maybe get this as well. Folk that maybe haven't had the chance to tell their story a million times. Mm-hmm. I love giving that ability, and they're the ones that are normally quite excited for the link for it to come out to share with everyone. I get such a kick off of that. It's a joy to have. You meet some fantastic folk, and I think selfishly, it creates, one, a pretty decent income stream, and two, a very good network in a sector that is built on networking, Mm-hmm. So yeah,
and there are a lot of podcasts out there. And to the layman who listens to, there'll be 5 or 6 different podcasts out. We mentioned Cammy Wilson's got one now there, and I was along with Jan from the Farmers Weekly one on the weekend, and the different ones. Mine's slightly different. That I started my podcast from a completely different reason. My podcast being that I lost a few pals. One real part of the world, actually, Donald Bigger from Chapelton. You probably have known Donald, and a few pals who knew a lot of information, a lot of stories. A lot of older folks had these fantastic stories about what they did when they were younger and all these things. And one by one, they're dying off, and those stories were never told. So I'm maybe telling those stories to people who are older, and getting that, capturing that information. And I believe the service that I'm doing is recording that information, and it's there forever. Whereas yours is a little bit more exciting, a lot more exciting, I would say, when you're talking to world-class football players and such like. But you're putting something out there maybe you're less than half my age. You're putting those out to a younger audience, and I think there's room for all of us in this world.
I think to say more interesting is very subjective. I think some of the best chats I've ever had is some of the old boys and girls sitting at an auction market here and there, and like you say, having that ability to sort of lock it in and it's there is amazing. It's a really nice thing to have. I was thinking about it recently. I introduced the ex-food and agribusiness policy manager for Rwanda to David, the guy with the insects I mentioned. And normally that's David, this is Regis, this is David. But what I was able to do was say, David, this is Regis, and this is Regis' story. Regis, this is David, and this is David's story. And that's a lovely thing to be able to do. And you mentioned, I think your reason for starting is important. I never quite mentioned that, Andy, was that people asking, how can I get into farming? That every episode I finish says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And if you had any tips or advice for people coming into agriculture, what would they be? And I think that's important. That's my reason. And one thing you mentioned was Donald Bigger. Never met the man myself, but we mentioned about the changes that we've got in our course. Our winter show is a livestock and machinery show now at Barony with a stock judging as well. The stock judging winner should hopefully they are this year going to Paris to compete in a stock judging competition. But the trophy for the livestock champion is called the Donald Bigger Memorial Cup, and that was donated by Jamie and the family. And it's always nice to sort of speak of Donald's story with Jamie every year, having never met the guy. And I think you're exactly right. Like someone like that, there is so much wealth of knowledge and entertainment in that brain, and to be able to save that is special. So that's nice. It's a really nice reason.
Well, there you go. That puts something between us. I was fortunate enough to be able to call Donald a friend through my connections with the Royal Smithfield show going back the way. You sound like a busy man. You've got a lot going on there to fit all this and do a lecturing job as well there. I think we need to probably leave you get back to that. And if you're recording 8 podcasts a month, you're doing a lot more than I am. So I better let you get back to that, Wallace. I really appreciated having you on here to chat to that. I'm sure some of your younger audience will be wondering who this old fart is that's talking to you. And likewise, some of my older audience will be thinking, listen to this young whippersnapper. But there's something for everybody that we can all give, isn't there?
No, that's it. And here, like, I've my podcast isn't all folk under 30. I've brought a lot of folk on. Don't think there's no ageism here. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for asking me, Andy. So I appreciate that.
No, it's brilliant. Well, I wish you the best. I'd say the Nuffield that we focused a few weeks ago on. I wish you the best with that Nuffield, and make sure you report back to us as well. And I'll keep your link going on our Facebook page. We tend not to be so much Instagram or Facebook, being that older generation, but we'll keep an eye on what you're doing there with that Nuffield. And I wish you best of luck with that.
Amazing, mate, and keep up the episodes. You're smashing it.
Thanks, brilliant job. All the best to speak to you. Cheers, Wallace.
Cheers, Andy.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tales, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harborough, for their continued support. And go and check out Harborough right now. Check them out on the internet, or maybe contact your local representative, or even pop down to their store there and have a chat with them and see how Harborough can help you with your livestock nutrition and, of course, their free nutritional advice that they offer out there, and the whole range of products they have that can help you improve your livestock business, improve your feeding regime, improve the quality of your stock all round there. So check out Harborough and see how they can help you out. And while you're there looking them up on the internet, of course, drop into our Top Lines and Tales Facebook community page there, where you can check out some other information on this and previous podcasts, and there'll be photographs, and you can even join in there and have your say.